Hello tankers and tankettes, and welcome to a viewer replay courtesy of Morpheus der Stahlkäfer here, who might just be a tiny little bit German, just a tiny little bit, just around the edges, not so much as you'd notice, but you know, anyway. So, as you can see, this is one of the new tanks that came in with patch 9.22, which I've not really covered any of or talked about, but suffice it to say, there are some issues. Yeah, there are some serious balance issues with some of these machines, and maybe a little bit less so with this one, the ISM, which is the new tier 8 heavy, leading to the new tier 10 heavy, the Object 705A. But even so, this is rather inarguably quite a strong tier 8 heavy tank. And there are a couple of stats that aren't so great. There's one in particular that's just outright bad, that being the view range. There are a couple that are mediocre, that being, as you can see, the mobility, which is not a great straight line speed, but the horsepower per ton I think is pretty decent. It also doesn't have a great amount of penetration for a regular tier 8 heavy. It's only got 215 with the AP shells. Although, of course, you know, there's APCR, so that doesn't really matter in the scheme of things. In a game where premium ammo wasn't a thing, the slightly substandard AP ammunition might actually have an effect, but no, not really, not in World of Tanks as it is. And of course then, this being a rear-mounted tank, it's also got not particularly good gun depression, although -5 degrees is still not terrible. The armour protection is also decent, although the best of it seems to be the turret. There is a weak spot in the form of a commander's hatch with 150mm of armour, which is significantly weaker than the rest of the turret armour, but it's quite a small target. The hull itself is reasonably strong, but it's not... You wouldn't sit out in the open like the VKB and use your frontal armour. It's not of that level of toughness. But if you're doing this, if you're side scraping, it is exceptionally good for that because of that rear-mounted turret. And this is all flat terrain as well, so Morpheus has just about optimal conditions here. Now, one of the strengths of this tank, which you got some flavour of there, is the DPM. It is really quite good. It is one of the best regular heavy tanks for DPM. I think only the, what was it, the Oho with the 100mm gun and the Carnarvon are better. And of course this is a 122mm, so it gets 390 average damage. Now the Oho's not too far behind that with 330, but the Carnarvon, which has by far and away the best DPM for a tier 8 heavy, has a somewhat measly, was it like 230 average damage on that gun? So yeah, it's quite a different prospect, even though the base DPM on this is what, 2000 versus 2500 plus. You've got to sit out in the open and expose yourself for a lot longer, whereas the DPM on this thing is quite nasty when coupled with that 390 average damage. Now that enemy ISM just easily punching through his frontal armour with the APCR rounds, but Morpheus himself has been rather studiously using the AP, but he's just about to run out of that. He's only got 3 left because the overall ammo count's not that high, and he is also packing a fair amount of APCR on the off chance he's going to get into a tier 10 game, which is not an unreasonable assumption with a tier 8 tank of any stripe, especially one with slightly weaker AP penetration. So it means you're more likely to be meeting these things firing APCR ammo. So yeah, it's not really, it's like, I don't need to go on here especially about why the premium ammo system does not particularly well serve the game, but this is just yet another example of it, really. So yeah, he's managed to rack up a fair bit of damage with the DPM, is what I was going to say before I interrupted myself to talk about ammo a bit. He's already at over 5,000 damage done, which is just slightly ridiculous. He's bounced a reasonable amount as well, but I mean, that enemy ISM took off half of his health fairly easily, so facing higher tier tanks, yeah, unless you can side scrape and you know you're not going to meet a Japanese derp gun or any kind of derp gun, the armor's gonna be okay, but for more mobile warfare, when you have to move around and take risks and be in the open. It's not going to hold up that well. I found it interesting here, by the way, that he's preferentially using HE rather than go to the APCR. So he's consciously trying to limit the costs of playing this and get as much damage done as he can with his credit or ammo. So I'm not sure what else really there is to say about the tank. He is using premium food here, and I actually counted the reload. He's either using ventilation in combination with food and a rammer, or else instead of ventilation he's got brothers in arms on this crew, because there's no other way that you could get the reload that he has unless he's got one of those 5% bonuses, but he definitely doesn't have both. And you can get this down to, I mean the default reload is over 11 seconds, but you can get this down to well under 9 seconds, well under 10 seconds by piling on everything. And the food especially, I mean, it's a bit of an expensive way to play the tank, and that's possibly why he's trying not to fire lots of APCR, but it's only going to enhance that already good base DPM even further. With the full whack you can actually get it up almost to the level of DPM that the Carnarvon has, except you've got a much nastier gun. So yeah, I mean the Carnarvon beats it in penetration, but this thing just hits like a truck. So that's one of the few remaining tanks done for, that Chinese tank destroyer, who again firing APCR, one of them penned and one of them didn't. I think it went into the gun mantlet, and the gun mantlet in the front of the turret generally is very tough on this thing. So like I say, if you can side scrape and only really expose your turret, especially the right side of your turret, you're going to do quite well. So what's left? Well, just artillery and a 1390 who is probably down south somewhere. That French arty does get a hit in, but it's not enough to seriously inconvenience Morpheus, so he's going to get another shot, but it's going to be a bit of an expensive shot for the damage done with APCR. But never mind, that's basically the last damage he's going to get. We've got 6,800 on the clock, 1,200 damage blocked, and another 560 assistance. And unsurprisingly, yeah, it's going to be someone else that finishes off that 1390 all the way down on the other side of the map. So let's take a look at the score screens. As you can see, he did actually land that that hit on the what was it, the Scorpion G with the HE shell. So yeah, that was a worthwhile shot as it turned out. For all his damage done, he 7,300 in fact, he got an ace tanker out of that, which you would kind of expect with that level of damage, and then unsurprisingly it's put him at the top of his team with over double the amount of XP, easily over double the amount of XP of the next best player on his team. So it was just a really good. Like, he was able to just be on flat ground, didn't have to worry about gun depression. He was able to side scrape, he was able to perma-track a Lerva and just farm them for damage, and all without having to resort to the APCR especially. And because he refrained from doing that for as long as possible, he still walked away with a profit, 26,000 credits, despite using the premium food consumable. So yeah, on paper it's, you know, it's not particularly the best at anything at its tier, but it has such a strong set of characteristics that if you can learn to play around the fact it's got a rear mounted turret and not particularly good view range and not particularly good straight line speed on flat ground, it seems like a really strong tank. And even then, it's not the strongest new Soviet tank that was introduced with the patch. I've had several of the was it the 268 version 4 this as the new tier 10. I've had several of those submitted already, and not one of them was under 5,000 damage done. So yeah, that thing just seems stupidly good, but this isn't too far behind it, quite honestly. So that's it for this replay of the ISM. Yeah, I'm really not missing World of Tanks at the moment. It's interesting to watch replays, but when Wargaming keep adding things like this in the game, yeah, it might be balanced after a patch or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. We know how long Wargaming can take to look at these things, but hopefully it'll be sooner rather than later, because as I say, some of these new vehicles, it's a little bit obvious that they're just a bit too good, more than a bit too good in some cases, and I would certainly say this seems to be one of them. So hopefully you've enjoyed this replay, and if you have, you can hit the like button, you can leave any comments below, you can sub to my channel if you haven't already, and as always, stay tuned for more.